Welcome to Access Your Leadership, where we share inspiring career stories and talk about ways that you can level up your own leadership potential. I'm your host and coach, Hakim, and today's topic is my own life and leadership journey. In this episode, I'll share the twists and turns of my early life that have taught me about me, my strengths, my weaknesses, what I love to do, what I haven't loved to do, and ultimately what I was meant to do. In true Ryan Holiday, the obstacles away fashion, I'll share some of the challenges and obstacles that reminded me that I've been on the path I was meant to be on, one that's well aligned with my own personal core values. It's a story I love to tell. In fact, I truly believe that our stories are ones that we should all love to tell others. I actually did a presentation once called Ditch the Pitch and Embrace Your Career Story. The idea is that while the 30-second or 60-second elevator pitch or B&I commercial does have value, and I can appreciate that, understanding the and loving the many twists and turns that your own life has taken to get you where you are now is just as, if not more important. So my thought behind this was, what do people know about me? And then that question that we often get at various networking, sort of speed networking events is, what's something that someone doesn't know about you? So people can access me online. They can look me up. They can see my posts. They can see who I am on social media. They can see my profile on LinkedIn, which is essentially, an online version of my resume. But I think what I'd love to share a little bit with the audience is the stuff that's not, easily found out, or things that you might not know if you didn't know me personally. My story starts with a man from Oujda, Morocco, and a woman from New Bedford, Massachusetts. My dad is from Morocco, came to the US when he was about 19, worked multiple jobs to put himself through school all the way until he got his doctorate in special education from Boston University. He met my mother while he was in a master's program at Salem State College, and they fell in love. He got his degree from BU and then taught there briefly before I was born, and we moved to the Middle East for him to work for Aramco Oil, teaching actually and creating curriculum for Aramco Oil. We bounced back and forth between Saudi Arabia and Kuwait, and ultimately my brother, who is a few years younger than me, was born in Saudi Arabia. And we lived there for about 5 years until we returned back to the US, and we had the option of going to the Northeast and braving the cold weather climate, or going somewhere a bit warmer. And some family was moving from the north down to Florida, so we moved to South Florida, and that's where I spent my childhood. I grew up in South Florida all of my school-aged years and had an amazing childhood. We had the playborhood where we had the holidays, and full streets for trick-or-treating, and we had the woods that we could go play in and build forts in, and I had a great upbringing, great friend group. Many of those guys are still my closest friends. We've all known each other since we were in first or second grade. So yeah, it's amazing to think of that time. Um, and we'd visit Morocco every summer growing up to visit my dad's family. And then my senior year, when everyone was getting pumped up to figure out how to maximize their senioritis and take a light course load, or they were thinking about and prepping for homecoming and prom, I decided to go spend the summer and then half the year in Morocco attending a French school. So I withdrew from my high school, and then I ended up going and spending half a year in a French school in Morocco, with no French language skills and very little bit of Arabic that I picked up in the summers coming to visit family, but nothing that was adequate for me to do school. And I think my grades probably reflected it. But I remember getting there and thinking to myself, okay, I have a strong sense of self. Going back, I got this question on a podcast recently where someone had asked me, when did you start coaching? And I know that they're probably asking me, like, when did you launch your business? But when I hear that question, I immediately go back to being 7 years old on the playground and a friend getting picked last for kickball, and me opting to sit that game out so I could walk with my friend, and we could just sort of talk through why it's not a big deal that he got picked last or not at all. And I don't know. I just was a big feeler. I remember having those experiences from a young age. Fast forward a couple years, not many, but into middle school, and there was an opportunity to become a peer counselor. And I remember being intrigued by that because it was a really unique, sort of ahead of its time program where middle school students could be trained and essentially certified by the instructor of the course to be available to their peers to talk through any challenges or emotional issues they might be having at that age. I mean, a lot of kids' parents were getting separated and they needed someone to talk to. So peer counselors were available for that. And then the other really bizarre and amazing thing that we were responsible for doing as peer counselors was to mediate conflicts. So you can imagine the lunchroom, we'd all be on the lunchroom and then a fight would break out. And then we'd all come in after the fight was broken up and lunch would get dismissed and we'd go back to our classes. And if we had peer counseling, we could very well be one of those people who is then sitting in the room with these two students who had just been fighting in the lunchroom to mediate the conflict and have like a conflict resolution document signed by each of them. And I did that for a lot of the time that I was in middle school. And I don't remember any of my friends doing that with me, or um I don't remember my parents ever saying to me, why don't you explore that? Or that might be a good idea for you. I don't know what compelled me to do that. I just think that I heard about that as an opportunity to help people and support people, especially my peers, and I was all in. So then in high school, they had a JROTC program, so a junior ROTC program for the Army, and I was in Boy Scouts, and I decided, okay, I will do JROTC because I like camping trips, and if this is the high school version of Boy Scouts, then count me in because this sounds pretty cool. So we did that. We started doing drill and ceremony. I started making some friends. I started making a name for myself. I was notorious for being promoted quite rapidly and then being demoted just as quickly. So I had a appreciation for leadership and authority, and I think that's really what compelled me to want to do JROTC for 4 years of high school. I mean, we had to wear a military uniform every Wednesday. Shine your belt buckle, shine your shoes. There would be formation. They would come and check your uniform and give you demerits if things weren't shined or gig lines weren't lined up perfectly. I mean, I remember all of it. And to be in high school with all of the stories and all of the typical movie scenarios that you can picture, people getting bullied or picked on in high school, or having this existential crisis halfway through or during their time in high school to figure out who they are. I i never i never encountered that. I feel like I had a very strong sense of self and what I wanted to explore. I was on the swim team. I played water polo. I also played soccer. Um, I was friends with a lot of different groups of people. Um, but I think that for me, it was an opportunity to just learn about people, learn about myself through those relationships. So, again, going back full circle now to where I started the story, which was my senior year, having the chance to go and spend a half a year in Morocco while everyone was celebrating their senior year. I thought, yeah, I could fish and I could skip school and I could get ready for prom, and I could go to parties and I could do all that stuff, but that stuff will be waiting for me when I get back. This seems like an opportunity to really challenge myself and to learn a lot about me. And I don't think that I, at 16 years old, 17 years old, was thinking or articulating it like that to my parents. I think there was even some resistance right before I was leaving for Morocco to even go at all, because I was starting to have second thoughts like, what was I thinking? Maybe I should stay and I should actually enjoy my senior year. And I remember my father looking at me and saying, no, you made this decision. This was your choice. We've made all the arrangements. You've withdrawn from school. We've signed you up with this school in Morocco, this French school. And well, this is happening. So Um, kind of like you made your bed, you got to sleep in it. And it was an amazing experience. I went there. I remember the first few weeks really struggling with the language. I was in school and, people were laughing at the way I said my name. The first day of school when they were doing roll call, and I was just having like a near panic attack thinking about if they don't call my name, how do I explain in French or Arabic? It's a French school, so mainly French. I could say, I like coffee. Do you like coffee? I play tennis. Do you like tennis? But I couldn't really give explanations and have full conversations in French. I was not fluent in either language by any means. And I was panicked. I didn't know what to do. And sure enough, roll call came around and my name wasn't called. And I think one of my cousins was in the class with me and she was sitting on the other side of the classroom and she like gestured to me, hey, raise your hand. She didn't call your name. You should let her know you're sitting here. So I raised my name and I could understand that she asked me, yes, what's your name? And I responded with my name, Hakim Lakhdar. And everyone just laughed at the way I pronounced my name in Morocco because it wasn't the way they would all probably say my name. It was very Americanized. And I remember just thinking, like, am I in some sort of terrible movie or, some bad dream where I'm in front of the class naked and I can't figure out my way out of this? And my father even came because my aunt, his sister, was getting married to her American husband, but in Morocco. And I remember him coming and I remember going to him and just crying. He was in his room and it was either right before the wedding or right after the wedding, weekend of wedding had concluded and he was preparing to go back home to Florida. And I was begging him, take me home, like just take me home. I can't figure this out. I don't know the languages. Nobody likes me. Nobody wants to talk to me. Um, I don't know what I was thinking. And he just, to his credit, gave me a big hug. I don't know if I could do it even as I think about it now, but um, hopefully what he saw in me at that time in my life and the person I was growing into, he knew I could handle it and that I would do something with it. So he gave me a big hug and kiss and said, I love you, son, but this is your journey and you've got to see this through. So sure enough, I stayed for many, many more months. I learned both languages fluently, near fluently, had a girlfriend in school and a group of friends. And I had a pool hall that I used to go to where I was a regular and people around town got to know me. And I was able to be a local. I was able to be Moroccan. I was able to be a teenage, boy in Morocco handling myself in a way that I didn't think I could handle myself the first 2 weeks I was there. And I think that taught me a great deal about what I was capable of doing in terms of self leadership and in terms of, the sort of we do hard things. Yeah, I can do hard things and I've done many hard things. And I think about the trajectory that started me on and the things I accomplished because of that challenge that really set me on a path to accomplishing some amazing things in my life and my career. And those who know me from a professional standpoint have heard about some of my accomplishments professionally, but I'll share a bit more about the personal, which is I went to Florida State, had an amazing time, and had again same thing at Florida State. Had a group of different friends. I mean, I applied to Florida State while I was still in Morocco. I got accepted and decided to attend Florida State before I had even seen the campus, before I had even been back in the States. So I was already committed to Florida State. And I think I saw it my first day of class or at like, the first week orientation. And I had a great time. I ended up walking out of there with a double bachelor's degree, a bachelor's in international relations and a bachelor's in sociology. And I valued school. I wasn't a star student. I was always good at school, but that was more of like from a figuring it out standpoint. But I think for me, I saw the real education of 4 years of college being the social interactions and relationships I was creating and navigating those 4 years. Friendship, professional, romantic, all of those just weaving in and out of this evolving human being who's also trying to obtain degrees and figure out some purpose and meaning to their life and direction. And it just was so fascinating to me. I loved every day held something new. And I remember in one of my sociology classes, I had the opportunity to go, quote unquote, undercover actually at fraternity rush week. And I had no desire to join a fraternity, but a lot of friends I knew had, and I wanted to experience it as somebody who wasn't going there for the purpose of getting a pin or for getting an offer to a fraternity. I just wanted to have exposure to it. And I think I ended up calling the paper something like getting at the heart of Greek life or fraternity life or something like that. And it was really about the human side of Rush. I mean, of course, there are all of the typical things that you hear about Greek life, and those all may or may not exist. I'm sure a lot of them do, but what I found was that I was really fascinated in the human side of it, people's excitement and nervousness and insecurities and disappointment when they didn't get a pin, and the way that groups formed and cliques formed, and people were attracted to certain people based on their backgrounds or the way they talked or the way they dressed. And I thought it was such an amazing experience to go through that at a number of different fraternity houses, seeing how that impacted me and if that was causing me to reevaluate myself or reflect on the world differently. And I think for a lot of young people, it did. And I think there were a lot of instances in college, and I had a lot of friends who experienced a lot of these same things, whether it was rush week or partying too hard or not going to class in the mornings. But I think that there's a lot of opportunity when you're just out there on your own to figure out who you really are. And sometimes that can be really scary. And I think many of us go through our lives and our careers not taking that time to reflect on who we are, what we're capable of, what we may not be capable of, um, and doing a bit of that self audit. And when that opportunity arises, I think a lot of us can be scared off by what we see, and what we find. And especially as, young, late teens, early 20s, college students, I saw a lot of my peers struggle with that. And I'm grateful for my experience in Morocco because I think that it really strengthened me in a way that allowed me to get the most out of my undergraduate experience. At the end of my undergraduate time at Florida State, I was at a bar at an outdoor patio listening to a guy play guitar and sing some sing-along songs by himself. And I think it was on a set break or at the end of his show or something. I just walked up to him and ended up asking if he's ever played with anybody or he's ever considered playing with somebody else. And he asked me if I played and if I sang. I said I did, and I really enjoyed singing, but I'd never really played in front of an audience and was kind of nervous. But he said, well, why don't you come over and we'll jam? And we ended up hitting it off and becoming great friends and toured the Southeast, playing as an acoustic duo and singing songs for colleges and universities all around the Southeast. We did sorority and fraternity functions, even though I wasn't in one myself. Game day events. One spring break, we went down to Key West and played, I think, a couple songs during a set break at Irish Kevin's in Key West on Duval Street. And next thing we knew, we were being offered to come back to Key West as a featured act for a few months. So after I graduated, we ended up going back to Key West, and I played as a featured act, guitar and singing with my buddy Tyler Reeve, who's actually still in Nashville, great guy, for a few months. And the day that they offered us something much more official to be an official act there, I think it was the same day I got accepted into grad school at Indiana University in Bloomington for Middle East and Islamic Studies master's PhD program. I had an amazing 2 years at IU. I think I rocked straight B's probably my first year. I was pretty young, partying a lot, playing music. I even recorded an album that was in a jukebox at the local campus bar where I worked while going to school. But I made a ton of great friends. I saw a bunch of the Midwest. And I eventually opted out of the PhD portion of the program and just left with my master's. But I've been interviewing with various alphabet soup agencies in DC, and with my degree and my language skills and my background, I was getting a lot of attention in that world, and I had explored and considered the possibility of doing some of that work with those agencies, but then also thought maybe not go that route and go the foreign service officer route, but still wasn't really interested in that life, and decided that I still kind of had this interest in doing a bit more of the entertainment life. I had enjoyed my time in Key West. I knew I didn't want to do that full time. That wasn't the vision I was creating, but I did like the idea of sort of pursuing entertainment a bit more. And, my dad was a playwright in Boston, so maybe I had it in my blood, but I wanted to try my hand at acting. So I ended up getting a couple agents down in South Florida, and I did some Advanced Auto Parts commercials. I was in Florida orange juice commercials. I did some short films and a couple featured films, and did a couple of those feature films as a stand-in for a local South Florida Hollywood celebrity. He's been in all kinds of stuff, and I call him essentially my acting mentor. So that time in my life, he was very much a mentor to me. And I had the opportunity to do a scene for him where I had to do a stunt where I would fall down some stairs. And they asked me if I'd be open to doing it. And I said, sure, why not? I'm young and able to bounce back. Sure, I'll do it. So I ended up getting suited up, and they pushed me down the stairs, and down I went. And when I got to the end, they said, wow, you did a really great job. You want to do some more of that? And I shrugged my shoulders and I said, sure, let's see where this leads. So did end up doing some more stunt stuff, did a lot of stunt driving, and I was in a number of Spanish soap operas, very well-known Spanish soap operas down here in South Florida. Even had some speaking lines. I speak Arabic, French, English, uh, some Spanish, but compared to everyone else who was on set, I was not a Spanish speaker, and I even had some speaking lines as the SWAT team leader. So I had a blast. I had so much fun. I was working with JCB Stunts, and I had a couple agents and well-known reputable agencies that were down here, Miami, New York, LA, and I was having a time of my life. But again, when I took a minute to reflect on what I was doing and what this was teaching me about me and how I was feeling about these experiences, I realized, especially in a conversation late night over a cafecito with my acting mentor in Miami while we were on set, he said, is this really ultimately what you want to do? You've got a master's degree, you've got some options ahead of you. And if you want to do this, then you got to be all in. If you don't, then this will always be here and you can come back to it if this is something that you want to explore or incorporate into your life later on. So I ended up moving to Las Vegas after rekindling a friendship that I had made with a woman in Indiana. She was out there, and we ended up having an amazing time together. I was out there for a year. I worked at a restaurant. I bartended and served, and substitute taught kindergarten, and had an amazing time exploring the West and Southwest because I'd never lived out there before. So having been in the Midwest for grad school, and essentially the South in Tallahassee for undergrad, and then I had a chance to go out to Vegas for a year, got to see all of that, camping in Joshua Tree and Zion and Bryce Canyon, and drive through Utah and Colorado and Grand Canyon. And it's just such a great experience to be out in that part of the country. And then once I realized, again, sort of reflecting, catching myself, auditing where I am at this point in my life, what am I learning? What am I liking? What am I not liking? I realized that it was time for me to kickstart my career. And that's where LinkedIn essentially catches up with me. I moved to Washington, D.C., sight unseen. I had never been to Washington, D.C. in my life. I think in high school there was a class trip that went there, and I don't think I went on that class trip. Well, I know I didn't, but moved to Washington, D.C., sight unseen, ended up doing a bunch of odd jobs, temping. I've got a master's degree. I was selling condos in Northern Virginia without a real estate license, and I would tee people up. They would say, "Oh my gosh, I'm in, you've sold me," and I would pass them off to the real estate agent for the real estate agent to get the commission off my sale because I wasn't an agent. And they would take me out to dinner, $50, $75 dinner as a thank you for their multiple thousands of dollars of commission that they got from this real estate sale. And I did that for a little while until I got a phone call from the American Bar Association. And I think I remember getting that call and not even remembering what job I had applied to at the time. But once I got in there and had a conversation, I realized, like, okay, now we're off and running. And this feels like we're moving into a space where I can start carving out my way a bit professionally. And I spent nearly 2 decades in the legal profession, working in Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Istanbul, Prague, doing all kinds of amazing work all over the world with people from DC and beyond, moving to Boston, having an amazing time working at HLS for nearly 8 years, meeting my wife, having our twin boys, moving back down to South Florida, getting the job at University of Miami, navigating that whole several years of transition for me as a new husband and father, but also for the university, going through multiple deans and administrations and everything, and ultimately settling on my own business and being in a position where I can be doing exactly what I'm meant to be doing, exactly what I love. And I hope that this story of the what's not on LinkedIn for me gives you a greater sense of like all of what came before I even started my professional career, before I started doing the 2 decades worth of work that set me up for what I do now and do so well and love doing, which is leadership development, training, and coaching. And I've been doing that with lawyers for, again, nearly 20 years, between 3 very well-known institutions, the American Bar Association, Harvard Law School, and Miami Law. And now I get to do this with leaders from any industry, from any state, any country, and it feels like an absolute dream come true. So I share this to give you a sense of the complexity of someone's story beyond what you might know of them based on job titles or institutions where they've worked or years of experience or schools they went to. We are much more than what we, even as openly as we might be, and I am, we are much more than what people see of us online. We are much more than what people can get a sense of from our LinkedIn profile per se, or even our resume. And I just encourage you to explore that with people and give people an opportunity to share a little bit about what's unique in their life or their experiences or their history or their background, because I bet they'll surprise you. And I'm sure that if you shared some of the things that you've seen and experienced and accomplished, you would surprise them and even yourself probably. But if there's anything here that you have questions about or you want to know more about, I am an open book. Reach out to me because I love telling this story, and I should love telling this story, and you should love telling your story too. And I'm sure there's so many more twists and turns that I could probably have built in or folded into the story or got into even more detail about certain things that, were probably appropriate or not appropriate for a podcast episode. But I think this paints a good picture of who I was before I moved into my formal career and the degrees that I have listed and the titles that I held. And it makes me a better coach. It makes me a better husband. It makes me a better father, a better brother, a better friend. And I'm grateful for all those experiences because I have a good sense of self. And I think that's what's allowed me to navigate my life and my career so effectively. I encourage you all to embrace your own story. So as always, I'd love to hear from you about the episode. What came up for you as you think about leveling up your own leadership game and loving and embracing your own leadership story? Please, if you enjoy the episode, I encourage you to like and subscribe. And if you want to connect with me, you can find me on LinkedIn at Hakim Lokdar or at lokdarcoaching.com. Thanks for tuning in. Keep being great, and we'll see you next time.